Newspapers now for you on France 24. Alison Sargent's back with us in the studio. Alison, we're starting with Kim Jong Un, his visit to China, the North Korean leader's first trip abroad, in fact, isn't it?
That's right, Stuart. His first trip abroad, and a very secretive one. If you take a look at the front page of the Financial Times today, they say, undercover, North Korea's Kim makes secret trip to Chinese capital. They talk about that train, that green train that tipped off the press that he might be in town. You can see it there. And they note that unlike his father, who we also see there, Kim Jong Un made no public appearances during his visit. It was actually quite the opposite.
And the New York Times is looking into what Kim Jong Un was hoping to actually achieve by this visit to China.
And they list quite a few reasons. First of all, they say he was making his debut as an international statesman, basically, continuing this new diplomatic North Korea we saw at the Olympic Games in Pyeongchang. This diplomatic Kim Jong Un who has agreed to put aside insults and hold talks with Donald Trump. The New York Times points out that China had until now been sort of left out of all of this diplomatic action that's been going on. But this trip has had the dual effect of putting China back in the game and also creating some competition between China and the United States. And you can see that in this cartoon by Marian Kamensky, a cartoonist based in Austria. We see Kim seems to be going in for that handshake with Trump, but then he blows right by him to meet with President Xi, and Trump does not look pleased.
No, embarrassing stuff. Now let's move to Russia now. Papers marking a day of national mourning there. This is for the victims, of course, in Sunday's shopping mall fire there.
Right, victims that were mostly children. We can see their faces on the front page of a popular Russian newspaper. This is the Komsomolskaya Pravda. Russian authorities are investigating the cause of the fire, and a national day of mourning has been declared for today. But it's a belated mourning. That's what the headline reads in financial paper Vedomosti. The paper says the Kremlin's decision to declare this day of mourning, well, it was the right decision, but it came too late.
And Russians have been quite vocally critical, haven't they, of Vladimir Putin in his response to this fire?
Right. The protests that have sprung up sort of around the country, there have even been cries of people saying that Putin should step down. That's according to the Moscow Times. One political analyst told the paper that the protests that we've seen around the country, well, they're a sign of actually how little Russians trust the government and also how little the Russian government trusts its own citizens. This fire, it's interesting to mention, did coincide with that move to expel Russian diplomats made by many Western countries. And the Washington Post says it's made for quite complex diplomatic messaging. They say, on the one hand, officials have to offer condolences to Russia. On the other hand, they're still trying to condemn them. For citizens, though, it's less complicated. The paper reports that flowers have been left outside of Russian embassies all across the world, including in London and in Washington.
Let's move on to something completely different in the papers now. Morocco, in fact. There's growing public anger there after two men sexually assaulted a young woman.
Right. Not only did they sexually assault her, they also filmed the assault and put it on YouTube. You can see a still image from that video on the site of Moroccan paper La Dépêche. Now, this video sparks particular outrage because it's not the first one, if you can believe that. It comes just months after a similar incident in which a group of boys filmed themselves sexually assaulting a young mentally ill woman on a bus in Casablanca. My colleague from our Arabic channel pulled out an interesting analysis, an article written by a Moroccan psychoanalyst. According to him, these attacks on women are a physical manifestation of the violation of women's rights that he says is constantly taking place in society. He says he's actually not so surprised by them. And he points to the lack of sexual education and also the lack of rigor from the government when it comes to dealing with sexual assault.
Let's move on to something lighter. I have to say, I'm getting to the point where I don't even believe our own programme. I didn't believe Stephen's figure just a moment ago, and I don't believe Alison's next story either. This is about a fish in Singapore getting plastic surgery.
That's right, Stuart. Plastic surgery for fish. You're not alone in having a hard time believing this. This is a fascinating article, I thought, in the New York Times. And they admit that plastic surgery for fish might seem pretty extreme, but they explain that these are not just any fish. These are arowana, also known as dragonfish. They're one of the world's most expensive aquarium fish, a popular luxury accessory across Asia. The main surgery they get is an eye lift, although some of them also get chin lifts. The one in that photo, you can see he looks maybe pre-op. You can see the dark part of his eye is looking a little bit droopy there. Yeah. So that's something he could get fixed up. The price tag for a surgery like that, the paper says, is $90. But some might say it's a small price to pay for beauty.
Well, I suppose so. Are they paying for it? That's what I don't know. Is this fish currency?
It's fish, right? Yeah, they pay in bubbles. I don't know. No, yeah, I think it's
could be. Alison Sargent with the papers on France 24. Nice.